Imagine discovering thousands of pages of court records, flight logs, financial documents, police reports, and witness testimony all connected to one man. Not because he was a politician, not because he ran a government, but because he built relationships with some of the richest, most famous, and most influential people in the world. For years, the name Jeffrey Epstein has represented far more than a criminal investigation. It has become a symbol of a larger question: how can powerful people avoid accountability for so long? This story isn't about internet rumors. It isn't about secret conspiracies or unsupported accusations. It's about documented facts, official investigations, court records, and journalism from credible organizations. The real mystery isn't simply what Jeffrey Epstein did. Courts have already established that he sexually abused underage girls and was later charged with federal sex trafficking offenses before his death in 2019. The bigger question is different. How did one financier with no publicly understood business empire gain access to presidents, billionaires, royalty, scientists, university leaders, and celebrities? Why were warning signs ignored for years? Why did early investigations appear to end with unusually favorable legal outcomes? And why, even after countless documents have become public, do so many questions remain unanswered? This documentary explores those questions through evidence, not speculation. We'll examine how wealth can open doors, how influence shapes institutions, how legal systems sometimes struggle when powerful networks are involved, and what the Epstein files actually reveal. Because sometimes the most important story isn't hidden inside one person's crimes. It's what those crimes reveal about the systems surrounding them. Who was Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein was an American financier whose life and criminal case became one of the most closely examined stories of the 21st century. Born in Brooklyn, New York, in 1953, he came from a middle-class family and briefly worked as a teacher before moving into the world of finance. Although he never completed a college degree, he managed to build connections with wealthy investors and eventually presented himself as someone who managed money for extremely rich clients. Over the years, Epstein accumulated extraordinary wealth and purchased luxury properties in New York, Palm Beach, New Mexico, Paris, and a private island in the Caribbean. He traveled on private jets, attended exclusive events, and built relationships with politicians, business executives, academics, celebrities, and members of high society. His ability to gain access to powerful circles made him appear influential, but many aspects of how he earned and managed his fortune remained unclear to the public. It is important to separate documented facts from speculation. Official records show that Epstein was convicted in 2008 for offenses involving underage girls and, in 2019, was arrested again on federal sex trafficking charges involving minors. These are established facts supported by court proceedings. However, simply appearing in photographs with Epstein, being listed in his contact book, or traveling on a flight associated with him does not by itself prove that someone committed a crime. Many individuals later stated that they had only limited contact with him or were unaware of his criminal behavior. The real significance of Jeffrey Epstein's story goes beyond one individual. His case raised difficult questions about how wealth, social status, and influence can affect institutions and delay accountability. It also highlighted the importance of investigative journalism, survivor testimony, and independent legal investigations in uncovering the truth. Understanding who Jeffrey Epstein was is essential because his story is not only about the crimes he committed. It is also about the systems, relationships, and institutions that allowed him to maintain an image of success and credibility for years before facing renewed federal prosecution. That broader context is what continues to make the Epstein case a subject of global public interest and ongoing discussion today. The first investigation. The first major criminal investigation into Jeffrey Epstein began in 2005 in Palm Beach, Florida, after the parents of a teenage girl reported that their daughter had been paid to visit Epstein's mansion. What initially appeared to be a single complaint soon led investigators to uncover a much larger pattern. As police interviewed more witnesses, multiple young women described similar experiences, alleging that they had been recruited to visit Epstein's home under the promise of money and were then subjected to sexual abuse. These consistent accounts prompted local authorities and the FBI to launch broader investigations. Investigators gathered witness statements, physical evidence, and interviews that suggested the allegations extended beyond isolated incidents. As the number of reported victims grew, many believed the evidence supported more serious federal charges. However, instead of proceeding to a full federal prosecution, the case took an unexpected turn. In 2007, Epstein's legal team negotiated a highly controversial agreement with federal prosecutors. Under this non-prosecution agreement, federal charges were dropped, and Epstein pleaded guilty in state court to lesser offenses involving the solicitation of prostitution from a minor and solicitation of prostitution. He served about 13 months in a county jail under a work release program that allowed him to leave the facility for much of the day. The agreement also included immunity for certain potential co-conspirators and was criticized because many victims were not informed before it was finalized. The plea deal immediately sparked debate among legal experts, journalists, and victim advocates. Critics argued that Epstein had received unusually favorable treatment compared to what many defendants would have faced in similar cases. Questions were raised about whether his wealth, influence, and connections played a role in the outcome. While no court concluded that prosecutors acted illegally, the agreement became a lasting symbol of concerns about unequal justice. Years later, investigative reporting and legal challenges brought renewed attention to the case. Courts later found that federal prosecutors had violated victims' rights by failing to properly notify them before finalizing the agreement, although the plea deal itself remained in place. The controversy surrounding the first investigation became a turning point, leading many people to ask whether powerful individuals are sometimes able to secure legal outcomes that ordinary citizens could never obtain. Those questions would continue to shape public discussion when the case resurfaced more than a decade later. Money, status, and social capital. One of the most important questions surrounding the Jeffrey Epstein case is not only what he did, but how he managed to build relationships with so many influential people. His story demonstrates how money, status, and social capital can create opportunities, open doors, and shape public perception. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, Epstein became a familiar figure in elite social circles, attending exclusive events and hosting gatherings attended by business leaders, politicians, academics, celebrities, and other high-profile individuals. Epstein carefully cultivated an image of success and credibility. He owned luxurious homes in several countries, traveled on private aircraft, donated to scientific research, and supported educational initiatives. These activities helped present him as a respected financier and philanthropist. In many elite environments, reputation and access often influence how people are perceived. Being connected to respected institutions or well-known individuals can create an assumption of trustworthiness, even when important questions remain unanswered. It is important to remember that social or professional association with Epstein does not by itself imply criminal conduct. Many people who met him, attended events with him, or appeared in photographs have never been accused of any crime. Responsible reporting requires distinguishing between documented relationships and evidence of illegal activity. This distinction is essential to understanding the case accurately. The broader lesson is about how influence can operate within powerful networks. Wealth often provides access to lawyers, advisors, public relations experts, and influential social circles. These resources can shape reputations, reduce scrutiny, or make institutions more cautious when dealing with prominent individuals. This does not necessarily require a coordinated conspiracy. Instead, systems may naturally become more hesitant when confronting people with significant financial or social influence. The Epstein case encouraged journalists, legal experts, and the public to examine how institutions respond when allegations involve wealthy and well-connected individuals. It raised questions about whether social prestige can sometimes delay accountability or discourage deeper investigations. Ultimately, this part of the story is not simply about one man's connections. It is about understanding how power, reputation, and access can affect decision-making within society, and why transparency, independent investigations, and equal application of the law are essential to maintaining public trust in the justice system. The 2019 arrest. More than a decade after Jeffrey Epstein's controversial 2008 plea agreement, the case returned to national headlines in July 2019. This time, federal prosecutors in New York announced new charges accusing Epstein of sex trafficking and conspiracy to commit sex trafficking involving underage girls. According to the indictment, the alleged crimes took place between 2002 and 2005 and involved the recruitment and abuse of multiple minors. The new case reflected years of continued reporting, additional witness testimony, and renewed interest from investigators following criticism of the earlier legal outcome. Shortly after his arrest, federal agents searched Epstein's Manhattan mansion. According to court documents, investigators recovered a large collection of photographs, electronic storage devices, and other materials that became part of the federal investigation. Prosecutors argued that the evidence supported claims that Epstein had operated a pattern of exploiting young girls over several years. At the same time, Epstein's legal team denied the allegations and prepared to challenge the charges in court. The arrest attracted worldwide media attention because it reopened a case many people believed had ended years earlier. Survivors who had spoken out in the past saw the new prosecution as another opportunity to seek justice. Several victims publicly shared their experiences, while journalists revisited earlier investigations to examine how the original plea agreement had allowed Epstein to avoid more serious federal charges. During bail hearings, federal prosecutors argued that Epstein posed a significant flight risk due to his immense wealth, multiple residences, private aircraft, and international connections. The court agreed and denied bail, ordering that he remain in federal custody while awaiting trial. The decision reflected the seriousness of the charges and the concern that he had the resources to leave the country if released. The 2019 arrest became a major turning point in the Epstein case. It demonstrated that even years after a controversial legal agreement, new investigations could move forward when additional evidence, public scrutiny, and survivor testimony continued to bring attention to unresolved issues. More importantly, the renewed prosecution sparked broader discussions about accountability, institutional failures, and whether justice can be delayed but not necessarily denied. For many observers, the arrest was not simply about reopening one criminal case. It became a symbol of how persistent investigative journalism, determined prosecutors, and courageous survivors can eventually force powerful institutions to revisit difficult questions that had remained unanswered for years. Epstein's death and the investigations. On August 10, 2019, just weeks after his arrest, Jeffrey Epstein was found unresponsive in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York. Despite emergency medical efforts, he was pronounced dead. His death immediately became one of the most widely discussed events in modern criminal justice because it occurred before his federal trial could begin, leaving many victims without the opportunity to see the case fully argued in court. The New York City office of the chief medical examiner officially ruled Epstein's death a suicide by hanging following an autopsy and investigation. However, because of the unusual circumstances surrounding his death, the incident quickly drew intense public attention and widespread speculation. Numerous theories circulated online and in the media, but it is important to distinguish speculation from verified facts. To date, no official investigation has produced evidence proving that Epstein was murdered. Following his death, several government agencies launched investigations into what had happened inside the federal jail. Reports revealed a series of serious failures within the facility. According to official findings, the two correctional officers assigned to monitor Epstein failed to perform required security checks, later admitting that they had falsified prison records. Investigators also found significant staffing shortages, employee fatigue caused by excessive overtime, and breakdowns in standard prison procedures. These failures raised difficult questions about how such an important inmate could have been left without proper supervision. Further investigations by the U.S. Department of Justice's Office of Inspector General concluded that multiple mistakes and systemic failures contributed to the circumstances surrounding Epstein's death. The reports criticized the Federal Bureau of Prisons for poor management, inadequate staffing, and repeated violations of established safety protocols. While these findings exposed major institutional problems, investigators did not conclude that there was evidence supporting claims of homicide. Although Epstein's death ended the criminal case against him personally, it did not end the broader investigation. Federal authorities continued pursuing related cases, including the prosecution of his longtime associate, while victims continued filing civil lawsuits seeking accountability. Journalists also continued examining newly released court records and investigative files to better understand the network surrounding Epstein and the institutional failures that allowed his crimes to continue for years. Ultimately, Epstein's death shifted public attention from one criminal defendant to the larger issues of prison oversight, government accountability, institutional transparency, and the ongoing pursuit of justice for survivors. Those questions continue to shape discussions about the case even today. The files. After Jeffrey Epstein's death, public attention shifted toward the thousands of pages of documents connected to the case. These materials, often referred to as the Epstein files, include court records, civil lawsuit filings, witness depositions, contact books, flight logs, search warrant documents, and evidence presented during legal proceedings. Over time, many of these records became publicly available through court orders and ongoing litigation, giving journalists and the public a clearer picture of Epstein's activities and the investigations surrounding him. However, one of the most important points to understand is that the existence of a person's name in these files does not automatically prove criminal wrongdoing. A name may appear because someone attended an event, flew on an aircraft, was listed in a contact book, gave testimony, or was mentioned by another witness. Responsible journalism requires separating documented association from evidence of criminal conduct. Only courts can determine legal responsibility based on evidence presented through due process. The release of these documents also highlighted the complexity of major investigations involving influential individuals. Journalists spent years comparing court records, police reports, financial documents, and witness testimony to identify consistent patterns while avoiding unsupported conclusions. In many cases, the files raised new questions rather than providing definitive answers. Some documents confirmed details already known through previous investigations, while others offered additional context about Epstein's network, his business relationships, and the legal strategies used during civil and criminal cases. The files also demonstrated the importance of transparency within the justice system. Public access to court records allowed independent reporters, legal experts, and researchers to examine the evidence themselves instead of relying solely on rumors circulating online. At the same time, many documents were partially redacted or released under court supervision to protect victims' identities and preserve legal rights, showing the balance between public interest and personal privacy. Ultimately, the Epstein files are significant not because they support every theory discussed on the internet, but because they provide documented information that helps explain how the investigations unfolded over many years. They remind us that complex legal cases must be understood through verified evidence rather than speculation. By carefully examining official records, court documents, and credible reporting, the public can better understand both the crimes committed and the institutional challenges that complicated the search for accountability. In cases involving powerful individuals, facts not rumors remain the strongest foundation for understanding the truth. Why accountability is so difficult? The Jeffrey Epstein case raised an important question that extends far beyond one individual. Why can accountability become so difficult when powerful people, vast financial resources, and influential institutions are involved? While the law is intended to apply equally to everyone, complex cases involving wealthy or well-connected individuals often require years of investigation, extensive legal proceedings, and significant public scrutiny before reaching meaningful outcomes. One major factor is access to resources. Wealthy defendants can hire experienced legal teams, investigators, and public relations specialists who challenge evidence, file numerous legal motions, and carefully manage public perception. These actions are legal and part of the justice system, but they can make investigations more time-consuming and difficult than those involving ordinary defendants. Another challenge is the influence of reputation and social status. Individuals who are respected within business, political, academic, or philanthropic circles may benefit from assumptions of credibility. Institutions sometimes hesitate to act quickly when allegations involve people with significant influence, not necessarily because of corruption, but because such cases require strong evidence and carry serious legal and reputational consequences. This hesitation can delay investigations and discourage potential witnesses from coming forward. For survivors, reporting abuse is often an extremely difficult decision. Many fear retaliation, public criticism, emotional trauma, or disbelief. When allegations involve someone with wealth and influence, those fears can become even greater. As a result, important testimony may emerge only years after the alleged events, making investigations more challenging as evidence becomes harder to obtain and memories fade over time. The Epstein case also demonstrated the essential role of investigative journalism, independent courts, and persistent law enforcement. Reporters continued examining public records, victims continued sharing their experiences, and legal authorities revisited earlier decisions as new evidence and testimony became available. Together, these efforts helped bring renewed attention to a case that many believed had already ended. Ultimately, the lesson is not that powerful people are beyond the reach of the law, but that accountability in such cases often requires extraordinary persistence, transparency, and independent oversight. Equal justice depends on institutions that are willing to follow the evidence wherever it leads, regardless of wealth, status, or influence. The Epstein case remains a powerful reminder that maintaining public trust requires not only enforcing the law fairly but also ensuring that no individual is treated as untouchable simply because of their position or connections.